The gala was already in full swing when my sister grabbed my wrist and pulled me into the center of the room like I was a prop she'd forgotten to arrange earlier. The chandeliers were blinding. Crystal everywhere. Women in gowns that cost more than my first car. Men with that particular brand of confidence that comes from never having been told no. And my sister, Vivian, glowing in a backless emerald dress, her smile so wide and so practiced it could have been painted on. "Everyone," she announced, lifting her champagne flute with the ease of someone who had rehearsed this moment in the mirror. "This is my sister, Claire." She paused. Just long enough. "The unemployed one." Laughter rippled through the nearest cluster of guests. Polite, light, the kind people use when they aren't sure if something is a joke but laugh anyway to avoid looking slow. A woman in pearls smiled into her glass. A man in a gray tuxedo raised an eyebrow with mild amusement. My sister's publicist, a sharp-faced woman named Dana, pressed her lips together and looked away. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I had spent 36 years learning how to absorb impact without showing the entry wound, and tonight was not going to be the night that record broke. "Claire's in between things," Vivian added, her voice dipping into that honeyed concern she deployed like a weapon. "You know how it is. Finding yourself." She tilted her head at me, the way you'd tilt your head at a stray cat you felt vaguely sorry for. "We're all rooting for you, aren't we?" More laughter. Softer this time. The kind that belongs to people who have already moved on. I smiled. Not warmly. Not bitterly. Just a smile, clean and flat, the kind that gives nothing away. And then, from somewhere to my left, a man's voice cut through the ambient noise of the room. "I'm sorry," he said, "did you say Claire Ashford?" The voice belonged to a man I had never met in person, though I had spoken to him on the phone twice. Tall. Mid-50s. Silver at the temples, the kind of face that had earned its lines honestly. He was looking at me with an expression I recognized immediately because I had seen it on the faces of clients, colleagues, and judges. Recognition. The specific kind that arrives when a name finally connects to a reputation. He extended his hand. "Richard Holt." I shook it. "Claire Ashford." "Yes." Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise exactly. More like the quiet satisfaction of a puzzle piece clicking into position. "Claire Ashford," he said again, almost to himself. "Ashford Meridian." My sister had stopped smiling. Not all at once. It happened in degrees, the way a photograph fades when left in the sun. The corners first. Then the eyes. Then the careful architecture of her entire expression, dismantled in real time by two words she had never once asked me about. "I'm sorry," Vivian said, her voice carrying a new texture now. Careful. Recalibrated. "Do you two know each other?" Richard Holt looked at her with the polite blankness of a man who has just heard something he doesn't quite know what to do with. "Know her?" He let out a quiet laugh. "I've been trying to get a meeting with Claire Ashford for 8 months. The woman in pearls looked up from her glass. The man in the gray tuxedo turned around. My sister's champagne flute hung in the air, suspended between her fingers and her mouth, going nowhere. I said nothing. I just let the room breathe. To understand what happened in that ballroom, you have to understand what happened in the 20 years before it. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, in a house that smelled like furniture polish and unspoken rules. My parents were not cruel people. They were simply people who had decided, sometime before I was old enough to argue about it, that one of their daughters was extraordinary and the other was fine. Vivian was extraordinary. I was fine. She had the voice. The confidence. The particular quality of presence that made adults lean forward when she spoke and nod along as though she were confirming things they had always suspected. She won the school debate championship 3 years running. She got into Georgetown on a merit scholarship. She married well, twice, the second time to Marcus Holt, who built a commercial real estate empire before his 45th birthday and was, as of tonight, hosting a charity gala in the ballroom of the hotel that bore his family's name. I went to a state school in North Carolina. I studied economics and stayed quiet and graduated without anyone throwing a party. I moved to Chicago with $4,000 and a laptop I had bought on a payment plan and spent the next 11 years building something my family never thought to ask about because they had already written the story of who I was before I had a chance to write my own. The name of what I built was Ashford Meridian. It was a boutique economic consulting firm. 8 people, then 14, then 23. We specialized in distressed asset analysis and municipal bond restructuring. Not the kind of work that made headlines or generated glossy magazine features. The kind of work that happened in quiet rooms with serious people and generated, in our last fiscal year, $4.3 million in net revenue. My parents knew I worked in finance. They did not know the details because they had never once asked. And neither had Vivian. Growing up, I had tried, in the small careful ways available to younger siblings in families like ours, to be seen. I brought home grades. I won a regional economics competition at 17 that came with a small scholarship check and a certificate I kept rolled in my closet because there was nowhere to display it. I read books my parents didn't understand and tried to explain them at dinner until I learned that dinner in our house was not a place for ideas. It was a place for Vivian's stories. She had an endless supply. The debate tournament she almost lost but didn't. The professor who told her she had a future in law. The boy who liked her. The girl who was jealous. Each one delivered with the timing and confidence of someone who had grown up understanding that the table was hers and the audience was captive. My mother listened with her chin in her hand, smiling. My father refilled his coffee and nodded. I ate my dinner. By the time I left for college, I had made a private decision. I would stop trying to perform for an audience that was watching a different show. I would simply build something real, quietly, in a room where no one was waiting to be impressed, and let the work speak whenever it was ready. It took 11 years. Tonight, it was ready. I had not wanted to come to the gala. The invitation had arrived 6 weeks earlier, not from Vivian directly but from my mother, who had forwarded it with a message that said, "Your sister would love for you to be there. It would mean a lot to the family. Please try to look presentable." That last line. I had read it 3 times and then closed my phone and gone back to reviewing a proposal for a municipal restructuring project in Ohio that was going to save a mid-sized city approximately $40 million over a decade. But I had gone. Because I still showed up. That had always been my particular flaw and my quiet strength. I still showed up, even when showing up meant standing in a room full of strangers while my sister turned my life into a punchline. I had flown in from Chicago that morning. I checked into a hotel 2 blocks from the venue. I wore a dress I had bought for a client dinner in New York, deep navy, understated, the kind of thing that doesn't announce itself. I had not brought business cards because I had not planned to do any business. Then Richard Holt said my name. And everything changed. Richard Holt was Marcus's father. I had not known that until he told me, standing in the middle of the gala while Vivian's champagne flute slowly lowered back to her side. "You did the restructuring analysis for the Carver County infrastructure bonds," he said. It wasn't a question. "We did," I said. 18 months ago. He exhaled through his nose, something between admiration and exasperation. "We lost that contract to your firm. First time in 11 years we'd lost a municipal bid to an independent." He paused. I spent 3 months trying to figure out who Ashford Meridian was. I couldn't get a meeting. "We were at capacity," I said simply. He laughed. A real one, the kind that surprised him. "At capacity. Of course you were." Vivian had recovered enough to speak. "Marcus," she said, turning toward her husband, who had materialized at the edge of our circle. "Do you know who this is?" Marcus Holt was 44, broad-shouldered, with his father's silver-templed gravity transplanted into a younger face. He looked at me with the careful attention of someone who had learned not to react before he had all the information. "Ashford Meridian," his father said. Marcus went very still. The firm that restructured the Carver County bonds, Richard continued. The one that saved the city 60 cents on the dollar. 40 cents, I corrected quietly. We got it down further in the final round. Marcus looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked at his wife. Vivian's smile had not returned. In its place was something I had never seen on her face before. Something unsteady. Something that did not know what to do with itself. You're her sister, Marcus said slowly. I am, I said. He turned to Vivian. The question in his expression was clear and quiet and devastating. You introduced her as the unemployed one. The next 20 minutes were the most interesting of the evening. Word travels fast in rooms like that. I have observed this phenomenon in boardrooms, and I confirmed it that night in a ballroom. Within minutes of Richard Holt speaking my name, the geography of the room had shifted. People who had laughed at Vivian's introduction began drifting in my direction with the specific momentum of people recalibrating their social calculations in real time. The woman in pearls introduced herself. She was on the board of a regional development nonprofit and had heard of Ashford Meridian through a colleague in Nashville. Could we have lunch? The man in the gray tuxedo turned out to be the Deputy Commissioner of Infrastructure for the city of Charlotte. He'd been trying to identify a firm for a bond analysis project. Could he have my contact information? A woman in burgundy, young, sharp-eyed, turned out to be a financial journalist for a publication I respected. She asked if I would be willing to speak on the record about municipal finance trends. I spoke to each of them briefly, graciously, and without looking at my sister. I did not need to look at her to know what was happening on her face. I had memorized the architecture of her expressions over 36 years. The particular sequence that began with surprise, moved through recalculation, and arrived, finally, at something she had never had to feel before. Smallness. Marcus found me near the bar an hour later, alone for the first time since Richard had said my name. He was carrying 2 glasses of sparkling water. He held one out. I took it. I owe you an apology, he said. You didn't introduce me as anything, I said. No. He looked down at his glass. But I've sat at that dinner table for 4 years. I've heard how your family talks about you. A pause. I never asked enough questions. I considered that. Most people don't. I should have. He looked up. What your sister said tonight. That wasn't, she does that. The jokes. I've told her it's not funny. She says it's just how sisters are. It's how she is, I said. I stopped taking it personally a long time ago. That wasn't entirely true. But it was true enough. My father wants to set up a formal meeting, Marcus said. Holt Development has 3 municipal projects in pre-proposal phase. He's been looking for an independent firm with your firm's track record. I nodded slowly. Have him reach out through our Chicago office. I'll make sure we find time. Marcus nodded. Then, quietly, I'm sorry she said that. In front of everyone. I looked at him for a moment. He meant it. I could tell because people who don't mean things don't apologize at parties. They wait until there are no witnesses. Thank you, I said. And I meant that too. Vivian found me near the coat check at the end of the evening. The gala was winding down. Staff moved through the room collecting glasses. The chandeliers had dimmed slightly. The crowd had thinned to its last generous handful of guests who weren't ready to let the night end. She looked different than she had 3 hours ago. The composure was still there but wearing thin at the edges, like paint on an old door. You could have said something, she said. Her voice was low. Controlled, but barely. I did say something, I said. When Richard asked. You know what I mean. She pressed her lips together. You let me stand there and look like, she stopped. Started again. You made me look ignorant in front of my husband's clients. I looked at her for a moment. Vivian, I said, you introduced me as the unemployed one. In a room full of people who turned out to know my name. I didn't know they knew your name, she said, as if that were the relevant fact. I know you didn't. I picked up my coat from the counter. That's the part worth thinking about. She stared at me. Behind the composure, behind the performance, behind the emerald dress and the practiced smile and the 20 years of being the extraordinary one, I could see something shifting. Not guilt, exactly. Not yet. But the first tremor of it. The realization that she had built an image of me and walked confidently into a room full of people who held the original. I didn't mean to humiliate you, she said. You did it anyway, I said, not harshly. Just plainly. You've been doing it for 20 years. The difference is that tonight someone was paying attention. I put on my coat. The world outside this family has known who I am for a long time, Vivian. You just never asked. I picked up my bag. Good night, I said. And I walked out into the cool night air, my heels quiet on the marble, the door closing softly behind me. 3 weeks after the gala, Holt Development signed a consulting agreement with Ashford Meridian for pre-proposal analysis on 2 municipal infrastructure projects valued at a combined $47 million. Richard Holt called me personally to confirm. He said his son had described me as exactly the kind of professional they should have been working with years ago. I thanked him and scheduled the onboarding call for the following Monday. My mother called the same week. She had heard about the gala from Vivian, which meant she had heard a version of it. She said she didn't realize I was doing so well. She said she wished I had told them more about my work. I sat with the phone for a moment, looking out at the Chicago skyline through my office window. I tried, I said. For a long time. A pause. Well, my mother said. We'd love to hear more now. I thought about the dinner table. The trophy shelf. The rolled certificate in my closet. The 11 years of quiet building in a room where no one was watching. I know, I said. I'll call you Sunday. I hung up and went back to work. 6 months later, I flew back to Richmond for Thanksgiving. My mother made the same roast she had made every year since I was 7. My father poured the same wine. The table was set the same way, the good china, the cloth napkins, the centerpiece my mother refreshed each season. Vivian was there. We had not spoken much since the gala. A few texts. One brief phone call in which she said she had been thinking and I said I had too, and neither of us said anything we couldn't take back. She was quieter that evening than I had ever seen her. She passed the dishes without commentary. She asked me about Chicago. She listened when I answered, which was new, and something about the quality of her listening told me she was making an effort, the effortful kind, the kind that means something precisely because it doesn't come naturally. After dinner, while my parents watched television in the other room, she and I stood in the kitchen washing dishes the way we had as children, her rinsing, me drying, the window above the sink dark with November. I've been thinking about what you said, she said. That the world outside the family knew who you were for a long time. I said. That was true, wasn't it? Yes. She was quiet for a moment, running a plate under the water. I think I needed the family to be the whole world, she said. For me to be the most in it. Another pause. That wasn't fair to you. I dried the plate slowly. No, I said. It wasn't. I'm sorry, Claire. I looked at her. She was looking at the water, not at me, the way people look away when they mean something most sincerely. I put the dry plate in the cabinet. I know, I said. We washed the rest of the dishes in silence. Not the cold kind. The kind that two people share when they have said the true thing and don't need to build anything more on top of it. Outside, the November wind moved through the yard. The kitchen smelled like dish soap and roast and the particular warmth of a house that has held the same family for decades, with all the tenderness and damage that implies. I hung up my dish towel. For the first time in as long as I could remember, standing in that kitchen, I didn't feel like the background of someone else's story. I felt like myself. And that, it turned out, had always been enough. If you've ever been dismissed by the people who were supposed to know you best, tell me where you're listening from. And if you've ever had to let your work speak for itself, drop a comment below. Subscribe, because next week's story is one you're going to want to hear from the very first word.